So each one of us has a uniqueness wherein the source itself can experience itself through us in 8 billion different ways. And so to rejoice in that, to recognize that no one of us is better than the other, or that we all have a part to play, and each one is necessary. If you think of it as a tapestry, we're all a thread in that tapestry that makes up this beautiful, incredible picture of who we are as a species.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Wetzel, and I am here with Dr. Gary Cohn. And Dr. Cohn is a published author, and he is also an energy psychologist. I almost said psychiatrist, sorry. Dr. Cohn, thank you for being here. It's nice to see you.
You're so welcome, Lisa. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, I've actually, where I'm from in Oklahoma City, Dr. Cohn is very well known, and he was referred to me numerous times that I should have him as a guest because he's so all-knowing, and specifically knowing in energy medicine, which is something that, in a little different way than what we're used to. And Dr. Cohn developed a system called the Energy Matrix Clearing System. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Dr. Cohn, would you mind telling us a little bit about your history and what brought you here?
No, I would love to do that.
Okay.
I started out as a drug and alcohol counselor in the 1980s, late 1980s, and I was working at a local hospital. And I realized that as we were treating our patients, they would continue to come, or they would relapse and come back for another treatment. And I began to wonder what was missing, what were we not getting to with traditional cognitive behavioral therapies. And the thought came to me that it was cellular shame, and it was that cellular shame that would be triggered and cause the relapse. So I began to investigate what method was there available that could access that cellular shame. And so I went on a journey to try to determine what that might be. And I tried so many things: hypnotherapy, inner child work, transcendental meditation, and I could go on and on and on. And those helped to some degree. But what really got my attention was, it actually was on my 40th birthday. Dr. Tom Hyder came into town, and he was he called himself he billed himself as a transformational kinesiologist, and so that word kinesiology got my attention, and I thought, well, maybe this was an avenue through which I could access information from the system itself. So I made an appointment with him, and he did some muscle testing, and after a bit, some emotion came up from like nowhere, and but I didn't have an agenda when I went, just to have the experience. And so he tested me and had me hold my eyes in different eye mode positions, and the emotion passed, and the session was over, and I just felt better. So I thought, well, this is amazing. I don't really know what that emotion was about, but it was powerful and it was strong. And what I noticed after that was that things began to change in my life that were long-held habits. And I thought I was onto something. So I called him to ask him if I would like to learn how to do his technique. And he said, well, he didn't teach it, but he learned from a couple in Switzerland. So he gave me their contact information, and this may be too long of a story, but he gave me their information, and so I called them, and they were no longer teaching. And so I had to find another avenue of learning how to muscle test and the technique itself, and that brought me to the One Brain system. And so for the next 5 years, I studied that system, learned kinesiology, a specialized form of kinesiology, which is testing both anterior deltoid muscles at the same time to access information from the system itself. So it was out of that I began to realize that there were pieces missing from the one brain technique. So I began to develop my own system, which I now call the energy matrix clearing system. So the difference was I added information that wasn't in their work. Their work being Daniel Whiteside and uh, uh, Gordon Stokes, but they didn't access the subtle energy bodies or the chakra system, and so I felt that the answer lie to getting to the place where I could access the cellular shame and release it was through those particular um, uh, parts of our holographic human energy system, as I call it today. Um, so that was the beginning of, that was a long period of time to get from that to energy matrix clearing system, and then I've had another 30 years since then. But so energy medicine, energy psychology is about working with the energy that we are as a human being. It's a holographic human energy system. So without the meridian system, without the chakra system, without the subtle energy bodies, we would just be animalistic. So it's that aspect of ourselves that brings the information in from the outside world into the inside world for processing and determining what to do with that information, which is delivered to the brain and then through the nervous system and then back out into the world again through the meridian system, the chakra system, and the subtle energy bodies. So each of those bodies play a very important role in our health and in our well-being, which really is not recognized by traditional medicine today. But without it, we wouldn't be who we are. And we're like a quantum computer, really. And so that's how I explain to clients what energy medicine is. What am I talking about? And I use the computer analogy to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So give me a real quick explanation, or the best you can do, on what is the energy matrix clearing system that you developed? What's the principle and the basis of it?
It's a system of accessing information from the whole system. So it's not. It's like accessing the hard drive of a computer that and determining where blockages are or viruses or distortions in the system that are causing issues in the system itself. So, in other words, disease or disease. So, EMCS is using kinesiology as a way to access that information from the higher self through the communication with all of the systems at the same time.
Okay. Okay. So when you're talking about energy,
Mm-hmm.
what is the context of energy and energy medicine?
So, so in recognizing are that we are energetic beings, we're electromagnetic beings. So, the Chinese call it chi, the Hindu call it prana. In the Western world, we call it life force. So the energy that surrounds us, the energy that we're swimming in, if you will, the unified field of possibility in which we're all swimming, is the information or the energy through which we're able to do everything that we do. So if that source of energy, the chi, the prana, the life force that's coming into the system is compromised in some way, say compromised by trauma that's held that we all experience in some way is blocking the system, whether that be the causal body or the mental body or the astral body or the meridian system or the chakra system. It's going to show up in the health and well-being, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical of the person themselves. So energy is the medicine.
Mm-hmm. So what's the game plan? Like, okay, so to make, is it to balance out the energy, to create a certain level of energy throughout the body so that it doesn't?
To clear the blockages that are interfering with the pure flow of life force that's coming into us to animate, to keep us as healthy as possible, and to get the creative energy that we need in order to be, co-creative beings in the world. So without that energy, we couldn't get out of bed. Without that energy, well, we would be dead.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so how does energy medicine work with the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health? Now, you may have just kind of described that a little bit, but let's go into a little bit more depth or more examples.
So if if we break our system down into pieces, if you will, that are all part of a whole and they're all intercommunicating with each other, the physical body is what is what gets sick, or we we get high blood pressure, or we have cancer, or diabetes, or whatever. So that from a energy medicine perspective, that's caused by some energy blockage in the system somewhere. So it's really a symptom of the blockages that have occurred, say in the emotional body, which is called the astral body, which is outside the physical body, about 8 to 18 inches out beyond the physical body itself. And it's emotional in nature, it's survivalistic in nature. Some researchers say that it was developed 200,000 years ago so that we could sense danger before we got so close to it we couldn't escape it. So, we all have experienced that. If you're leaving the mall and it's night and you're walking to your car and all of a sudden you get this sense that there's danger somewhere, like the hair on the back of your head, stand up, and you get this information that says, look around. That's the astral body that gives us that information. So because it is so chaotic, because it is so focused on survival, and it communicates directly with the limbic system of the brain, which is the old brain, the reptilian brain, it's just basically survivalistic in nature. So most people operate out of that body most of the time. So fight or flight is the name of the game there.
Mm.
So if that's compromised, then of course it's going to compromise the system that's below that, the etheric body, and the physical body itself will be compromised because of that energy. So if we go out to the mental body, the next body out, which is where thought originates. So we tend to think that we think in the brain, but in truth, the brain is not a thinker, nor is it a processor of thought. It is, however, a responder to the thoughts that are generated in the mental body, which is outside of our system, but it's a part of the whole, part of the holographic human energy system. So because it is outside of us, it has the ability to take in information from everywhere. So thoughts that come into us from a podcast, or a thought that comes in from a news program, or our neighbor can we can grab hold of that thought as if it were our own, and then feed that thought through our emotional body and into the physical body, and then it becomes our reality.
Mm.
So that's why it's so important for us to be discerning about the information that we take in, listen to, spend time around, because it impacts us. Thoughts are things that affect other things. It is technology through which we create our reality. And
Okay.
then we go to the next body out, the causal body, which is the furthest out and the highest frequency of each of the of our system, of our holographic human energy system, is where we hold our consciousness. So if we have a low level of consciousness, let's say fear based, then everything will be filtered through that fear, through that level of consciousness of fear that then impacts our thoughts, impacts our emotions, and then impacts our physical health and well-being, and then we send that energy back out into the world, creating a fear-based reality.
It makes sense to me.
Did that answer your question or not?
Well, no, it does. And I keep getting distracted because there's a picture that is behind your shoulder. And so I kind of want everybody to see it's like the human figure and a big egg. And what that, because I've sat in that chair before, I know exactly what that picture is. And that the white part that looks like the egg that's around the human body are the energy fields that you're referring to.
That's correct.
Yeah. Now, I also want to make sure because sometimes people, when we talk about our energy field,
Mm-hmm.
they might confuse it with the aura. Now, it's two separate things, right?
Well, aura is an old term.
Okay.
So today it's human biofield.
Okay.
So it's always been, we've always had this energy surrounding us, always, or we wouldn't
Mhm.
be who we are. So if we're in that made in the image of a creator, that's how we're made in the image of the creator, in that we have the inner technology, which leads us to my chart of our inner technology to create our world is our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions put into action becomes our world.
Yeah.
So we're because we're I think you're familiar with um, David Hawkins' work in Power versus Force, and he says 85% of the world's population operates at or below 200 on his chart, his level of consciousness chart, which says that most people operate from fight or flight,
Yeah.
that they're in survival mode,
Yeah.
and so really, what EMCS is about is clearing the blockages, elevating the level of consciousness by doing that so that people can begin to operate not from the survivalistic um, programming that we
Mhm.
have, this sea of that we've been swimming in for thousands of years. But as our consciousness elevates, and it has, we have the ability to become conscious co-creators with Source itself.
Yeah.
We can't do that if we're locked into the programming of survival.
Yeah.
So EMCS is about moving people from that survivalistic perspective, believing that that's the only ocean to swim in, not realizing that there's a whole other ocean, which we call thriving, where we can actually live the life that we want to live.
Right. Yeah.
It's a higher frequency, a higher vibration, and it's available to us because of these energy fields that make us up. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that, a lot of people, we don't even realize that we're in fight or flight. And, and fight or flight goes back from basically probably about the day we were born, probably. You think?
yeah, it goes back thousands of years.
Yeah. So let's just relate it to this human lifetime. So in this particular lifetime, you think about how every day we make choices and decisions based on fear. And you don't even think about it because when we think of fight or flight, we think that, like somebody's chasing after us with a knife, or something in that sense. But in fight, when you're in fight or flight, it can be, oh my God, I'm late for the bus. Oh my God, I'm late for an appointment. Oh my God, I got to get this job done. And it's like anytime that we start feeling that anxiousness or that something in our system
Mhm.
that creates that fight or flight. Is that right?
That's right. Absolutely.
And it's hard to break it when you're so used to being in it. You don't even recognize it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by we've been swimming in that ocean for so long, we don't know there's another ocean to swim in.
Yeah. And it's almost, yeah.
We're just
And it's almost,
to our own.
I'm sorry, you were cutting out. We're having microphone issues. Sorry, guys. So, what were you saying?
We're just reacting to our own long-held beliefs of fear
Yeah.
over and over and over again, and perhaps many different forms, but it all comes from the same place, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one of the things that people don't realize that they're in fight or flight, for one thing, because we're so used to being in that it's actually really hard to wind down from and recognize, oh my gosh, there was a difference in how I felt a month ago and how I feel today. And then being afraid of not being afraid, because it's so comfortable that when we start feeling ourselves let go of the emotions or the anxiety or whatever it may be that's stirring up, that if I let it all go, then what's going to happen? I'm not going to be a productive citizen. I'm not going to be successful.
Yeah, the lies of the ego.
Yeah. 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 So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, okay, so we know that this energy system, this energy body, it can create our anxiousness in our minds, but it also can affect our health.
absolutely.
So, how does the health, how does it affect disease?
Well, even the CDC has come to recognize that 80, I think they say 85% of all diseases have an emotional component. So if we're constantly in fear, then that's going to affect the kidneys. So then you have kidney issues, or the kidney and the bladder in the meridian system, the Chinese meridian system, are paired. So the kidneys are about fear, the bladder is about not feeling safe. So then you have kidney bladder issues,
Mhm.
or if someone who has a habit of being very self-critical, self-judgmental, beating themselves up for not being good enough or not being successful enough or those kind of things, eventually that will impact the small intestines. And so
Mhm.
out of that comes gastrointestinal issues, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, which is caused by. So what happens in that case is the norepinephrine and epinephrine and cortisol and 100 other fight or flight chemicals inflame the cilia of the small intestines, which are the docking ports for the nutrients that we that we need to absorb from the food that we eat. So that those chemicals inflame those cilia to the point where the nutrients can no longer be docked and absorbed. So they're just passing out of the system and diarrhea. Or it becomes so clogged up, then it becomes constipation. Either way, it's a it's like killing oneself, starving oneself of the nutrients that they really need, simply because they're being so self-denigrated.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting, because we talk about, our emotions and our traumas and all of those belief systems that keep us feeling small, all of that stuff. And we talk about it over and over and over and again. And a lot of times, what people in my world talk about is by letting it go so that we can ascend to a higher level of consciousness. But I also think it's really important to understand how these traumas and these belief systems and these feelings of anxiousness and low self-worth affect our physical body in the way that it is really that old term called disease creates disease. And
Absolutely.
so, what are some of the common energy system blockages or distortions, and how can they affect our health? You just mentioned a couple, but can you mention some more?
Sure. Um, if we if we think of the lungs, and the lungs being our life force, really, if we're breathing deeply of life, then we're oxygenating our blood, which oxygenates our brain. Then we can think better. Our body's healthier because it's being flooded with the oxygen that we need in order to be healthy. So when we're anxious, then we're no longer breathing deeply. We're just hyperventilating, really breathing from the top of our chest and not the bottom, of our lungs, not filling our lungs completely. So it limits our life. It limits. We don't have enough energy. We don't feel good because we haven't oxygenated our system in a way to be healthy. When we think of the large intestines, the large intestines are about hanging on to the past. Naturopaths say death begins in the colon. So we're actually reabsorbing the toxins from, say, being constipated back into the system, or I say we're hanging on to the same limiting, destructive beliefs that are actually killing us. Mm-hmm. So either way, whether it's a toxic belief or whether it's old food, we're poisoning ourselves.
Mm. Yeah. So, do we have the ability to consciously choose and influence our energy and emotional states?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, can you tell us how? I mean, it sounds so simple. It's like, oh, I'm going to choose to be happy today.
Yeah.
Oh, but I've never been happy before, so I'm not sure how to do that.
Yeah.
So, can you kind of help us out here?
The name of my business is the Cone Center for Living in Choice.
Yeah.
So when I created the chart, you can see the pink and blue green chart behind me. I developed that chart called the Levels of Responsibility chart because I realized that the clients that I worked with really didn't understand that what they believe and what they think and what they feel and what they put into emotion, energy in motion is the creator of their life experience.
Yeah.
So the chart is about, one side is the reactive side of the chart, which shows you exactly if you have a, let's say, an apathetic view of life, then it's going to show up as grief in the internal environment and the chemicals of grief, because the grief is about having given up one's power by believing they didn't have any. Mm-hmm. Then that shows up energy in motion as anger, resentment. So it feels better than grief or apathy because it's a higher frequency or vibration. And it could be positive if it motivates you to courage. But for most people, it's just blaming someone else or being angry at someone else for them not getting what they want. So it doesn't do anything but continue the cycle of powerlessness and hopelessness and helplessness. So that's what I call the world of survival, the victim perpetrator model of the world. So the other side of the chart represents a higher frequency, higher vibration, that's available to us. We're hardwired for that in our DNA, just as we're hardwired for the survivalistic aspects in our DNA. We just haven't been taught we have those. So EMCS and the system that I created is to assist people in shifting from the old paradigm into the new paradigm of learning to thrive. So that conscious awareness of, and that's what I love about the chart, when people look at the chart and they say, oh yeah, I can see where I am, but I don't want to be there. So then they look at the other side of the chart, oh, I had rather be there. So just that awareness in itself assists people in recognizing where they are and what's going to happen if they continue to operate from the same place. Mm-hmm. And if they choose to, in the choice is really moment by moment, because we're so ingrained with survivalistic coping mechanisms that keep us locked into slavery, really, in so many ways.
Yeah.
that it takes a lot of practice. It takes, a constant recognition of the thoughts that you're actually giving energy to and feeding. And when you do that, they become your reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, as you're talking about this, what's coming to me to think about is, is gossip or the victim. So and so said this, and so did this to me, or so and so did this to somebody else. And how it's such an everyday conversation, and how we're just kind of ingrained in looking at life these ways. So, like if I'm completely unaware, oh, I'm saying so and so did this to me and I'm mad about it, but not being able to recognize that I may have just put myself into the victim mode. What are some signs or some things that we should start recognizing when we may not be aware of destructive language, destructive ways of thinking, behavior?
Right. So what happens is most people operate from an intellectual perspective. So it's like they're cut off at the neck.
Yeah.
So they're speaking the words and they're saying, the judgments, the criticisms, the gossip. I say gossip is violence. You're really being violent towards someone else when you use that language.
Yeah.
So if I teach people to stop and connect with their inner selves. What does that feel like? What's going on inside of you? In other words, what comes alive internally when you're dishing someone else? When you're talking, you know, bad things about other people. What does that feel like to you? What's it doing to your internal environment? So if people will just stop and take a deep breath and ask, what's going on inside of me as I'm relating this story that I don't know if it's true or not true, or if that really happened or not. What does that look like to me? So it's holding oneself accountable for the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that they're utilizing for the creation of their world. And we tend to project onto the world around us that which we don't want to own within ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's much easier to see it in someone else, but it's not so easy to see it within oneself. So if you're judging someone else, then you're projecting something from that you're not willing to look at within yourself onto them because, well, it's like a hot potato. You don't want it, so you're going to throw it to somebody else and let them hold it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help. It just keeps you stuck in the same old pattern. So,
Yeah. I think that the term judgment is a good word. If you ever feel like you're putting a label on somebody or you're describing them, then maybe that's a form of judgment.
and
Do you think?
and projection.
Yeah. 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 Because it's like, well, this person isn't fitting in what I think that they should be.
Right.
So, yeah. So, things to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we want to kill them because they're different.
Yeah.
And it goes
Yeah.
to difference. It really does.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think it's just important for us to kind of look at these emotions that we may not even be thinking that we have, and then we start all of a sudden, you may be having a conversation with somebody at lunch and they start telling the story, and then all of a sudden you get sucked right into it and you start acting the same way that they are. So the more that we can become aware of the way that we're acting and reacting, our thoughts and our feelings, the more that we can recognize how programmed we are and how stuck we're in the fight or flight.
Mhm.
And yeah, and that we're actually killing ourselves, literally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
creating disease. Yeah, yeah. Every time we do it.
We
Yeah,
are our own worst enemy for sure.
absolutely. Yeah. So you had mentioned kinesiology earlier.
Mhm.
And so, a lot of people don't really know what kinesiology is. I mean, muscle testing is a more common word.
Right. right.
you know, but a lot of people may not even know what muscle testing is. So can you kind of talk a little bit about what kinesiology is and how you use it in the form of energy work?
Sure. So the word kinesiology just means the movement of muscles, basically.
Mhm.
So back in the 1960s, a chiropractor by the name of Dr. George Goodhart in Chicago began to do some sort of experiments with his patients. He would he would test their feet to see if one foot was longer than the other or one leg was longer than the other, and he began to notice that if they were allergic to a substance, say refined sugar, and he placed the refined sugar on their body, then one leg would be shorter than the other. So then he began to expand that with other substance, and he found that that was common. If the person was having an issue with that, then the muscles were going to be different. You know, one was going to be shorter than the other. So then he began to just write the word of the thing, you know, like refined sugar on a piece of paper, lay it on their bodies, and they would go weak. So, you know, he thought that was fascinating and did a lot of work around that. He had a friend, Dr. John Diamond from Australia, who was a psychologist, I think. Um, but he was very fascinated with Dr. Goodhart's findings, and so he wondered if he could translate that into behavior. So he began to use muscle testing to muscle test his clients for positive and negative emotions. So he would have them think of a negative emotion, and he discovered that the arms would go weak. Or if they had a positive thought, then the arms would stay strong. Or whatever muscle it was, you can test any muscle in the body. But I use both arms at the same time using the anterior deltoid muscle because it's it's more comfortable for the client and it's easier for me. So because I ask a lot of questions, and if most chiropractors or homeopaths test with one arm held straight out from the shoulder, and so my other thought about that is that well, we're only body works in cross pattern, so the you know the right brain controls the left side of the body and vice versa. So if you're testing one arm, you're only testing half the brain. So I use both arms to test both hemispheres of the brain, thereby bypassing the ego or the belief system.
Yeah.
So getting to the higher levels of truth. And Dr. Diamond, in his research, determined that if the question is stated accurately, the uh, the results are 97% accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually I learned a little bit about muscle testing in massage therapy school
Mm-hmm.
because I had a chiropractor who taught us, and we did it with the legs, one leg longer than the other. But then we were taught, you know, the muscle, the one arm thing. And I do like the two arm that I did with you. But it's always amazing to me how intelligent our bodies are.
Absolutely.
That our
But
bodies will give us all the answers
yes, it will.
every time.
It will.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. We're the most incredible beings.
we are.
And, you know, it's like if you really look at how in the world we were created, you know, whenever anything is out of balance, you know, iridology, we can look at our eyes. Our eyes will tell us, you know, the different forms, the way that ancient China or traditional Chinese medicine, you know, the tongue changes colors and textures, the ears have different signs. You know, our body is going to speak to us.
Yes, it will. If we listen.
we just have to listen and have to learn how. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, just a thought I had when we were talking about feelings a minute ago was that if we don't have, most people don't have a feelings vocabulary. They don't have the ability to determine what they feel. You know, most people know when they're angry or sad or lonely or, happy but other than that, the there's just, people just don't know what's going on inside their bodies. They don't have a vocabulary to determine, well, I feel overwhelmed or I feel disgusted or, I feel hurt or whatever it happens to be. And that's so important to be able to become a master of one's own world.
Yeah. Yeah. You had mentioned also that when you're doing kinesiology, that you can tap into the Akashic Records.
Right.
Do you remember saying that?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you mean by that?
So, so to be able to access, say, a past life experience that has in my work, it's if a past life experience is carried over into this lifetime, whether that's to be healed in this particular lifetime or somehow understood in a different way, in a more positive way, because it's limiting their life, then through the muscle testing, it shows up. Just an example of one experience I had. This was many years ago. I had a client who had some back issues, chronic back issues, and she had been everywhere, and the medical community had no answers for the reason that she had the pain. And so we were doing some diffusion work, and it happened that past lives came up. We went to the arms will take you anywhere. So we must have back to a past life. I don't remember how many past lives it was now, but it came to light that in that past life she had been a sword had killed her. She had been stabbed in the back with a sword, and where um, that where that sword went into her body was exactly the same place that she heard all the time. Mm. So we cleared that energy, we cleared the trauma of that from that past life through the process that I do using Judgement mineral essences to clear that information out of the system. Then 2 weeks later, she returned for an appointment, and she had no back pain. And then I've seen her for years since, and that's never returned. Yeah. So it's pretty amazing. That's just one example of the many that I have that has shown up in that particular way. I don't specifically do, past life readings or specifically do Akashic record readings like you do. I know it does come up. The body does hold that information, and it is available when it's needed to be made. When it's needed to come to light for a healing purpose.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think like what you said, it's all in the questions too. Again, the energy, the memory is within our physical structure. And we know this. I mean, we talk about it all the times in different forms of energy healing and all that. So just being able to access it by the body's knowing through muscle testing, it's fascinating to me. And just being able to go back, billions of years. However long back we want to go to answer these questions, it's fascinating to me.
We're a microcosm of the macrocosm, so
absolutely
we hold all the information within us. We're holographic.
Yeah. Well, that's my next question.
Oh, okay.
Perfect segue. So you do talk about the holograph. Oh my gosh, can't say it. Holographic energy system. And I can remember years ago people talking about, this was back in the late 90s, actually around 96, that I was hearing about the holographic energy system. So explain what that is, because I haven't heard anybody mention it in a very long time.
So a holograph means that each particle of the whole holds the full picture of the whole. Mm-hmm. can take a cell out of our body and it has the record of our whole body. So when I say holographic, it means that the physical body, the chakra system, the nervous system, the muscles, the organs, every aspect of the body, every cell of the body itself interacts with the etheric body, which holds the blueprint for the physical, which communicates with the astral body, the emotional body that we talked about, then the mental body, then the causal body. So they're all working together as a whole to ultimately keep us healthy and vibrant and alive. So it's, you know, if we take a piece out and try to fix the piece, we're just focusing on a symptom. You know, we're not really looking at all the pieces that go together to make that thing happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I mean. That's when I say holographic. And then we could add holographic to that, which is the way we're connected to the whole of the universes itself.
Mm-hmm.
We're communicating constantly with everything, everywhere, all at the same time, which is why we can say we are all one.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's so funny because again, we look at these physical bodies and all we see is the exterior.
Right. Yeah.
Gosh, we are so complex. You know,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Yeah. And it's all on that energy and vibrational level that's, you know, deep in every single one of our cells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just quantum physics.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard for us to comprehend that because the way that we see things is so solid.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, it's so interesting. So, okay. So what are the specific techniques and practices that within the EMCS system do you do? Because you mentioned them and I see the bottles behind you, but, how do you, with the system that you use, okay, we've kind of figured out how you diagnose or come to determine what needs to be treated. So how do you treat it?
Determining the energy blockages. We're not diagnosing. Let me be clear.
Okay. Say that one more time again. I'm sorry.
I said, I said, let me be clear. We don't diagnose.
We don't diagnose. We're not doctors.
We're not.
Correct.
Through muscle testing, identify energy blockages that are causing issues in the system itself. So, in order to answer that question, have we got time for me to go back to how I got there?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I was working on my doctorate in 1996. I had the idea at the time that the chakra system was the main system that was the culprit, if you will, or held all of the information about us. You know, that would determine our health, our well-being. And so I was so excited and passionate about that, and so I read this book called The Nine Faces of Christ by Eugene Whitworth, and he talked about subtle energy bodies in a different way than I had thought about before. So I thought I needed to call him and have a conversation. So I called him, got his number, and called him, and he actually answered the phone. It was incredible. And I was so passionate about talking about the chakra system, and he was very patient and listened to me. And in a bit, he said, Gary, it's not about the chakras. It's about the subtle energy bodies. Go back and read chapter 13 in my book. So it caused me to realize that if we were going to actually make changes in the physical body, we had to have a way to extirpate or clear the blockages of stored energy that was causing the problem in the subtle energy bodies. I didn't have a clue as to how to do that. So, but it put me on the path, and so I began to meditate and call in, you know, my guides for answers to that question. And after some time, it was several months, I think, I had a dream one night, and in the dream, I saw the Big Bang. I saw the explosion. I saw all the the fiery, the beautiful aspect of that explosion, and then I saw the cooling of the lava into gems and minerals, and it was beautiful. And I was awestruck by the dream. It was just incredible. And but I didn't really put together that was the answer to my question.
Mm.
But the next day I was working with clients, and all of a sudden it came to me: the gem and minerals hold the frequency and the vibration for since the beginning of time. So they must have the information inherent within their structural makeup that could impact our subtle energy body. So then I began. You couldn't buy them at the time. You could buy a few because they've been used since Egyptian times, but more as gemstones ground up in a tincture as opposed to a homeopathic. But anyway, so I began to do some research, and I discovered a Native American man here in Oklahoma who knew how to make gem and mineral essences, and so he taught me how to do that. And then later, I found two books by a channel person named Garudas, who talked about gem and mineral essences and how to make them and the impact that they had on our system. So I had validation that my dream message was correct. And so then I began to make my own gem and mineral essences and muscle tests to determine particular combinations for particular, like the chakra systems. And as most people don't know, we have 4 chakra systems. We have the etheric body chakras, the astral body, mental body, and causal body. So we have, we're a very complicated system of interacting, interconnected frequency systems. So that's how I came to use the gem and mineral essences as the clearing. So once we identify the information through muscle testing, and we identify the systems in the energy matrix clearing system, there are a number of major categories with perhaps thousands of subcategories that could come up. But whatever comes up, then we identify a gem and mineral essence, or I use flower essences as well. I use sacred geometry essences made from sacred geometry. So the body chooses which of those homeopathic remedies would be the appropriate one for clearing, eliminating the blockage in the energy system.
And I will testify that they work because I've used them. I am a client of Dr. Coates. So what's interesting though is that, for me, I've done a lot of work. I've been doing this for 30 years trying to clear myself out. But what I'm curious about is that if you find a blockage, and let's say it has to do with a childhood trauma, I don't know, sexual abuse by a father or something,
Mm-hmm.
and you find the problem and you give me the essences, whichever one that I need. Does the person, is that all they need to let go of that energy, or is there additional, do we need counseling? Do we need to talk through it? What are the other things that need to happen in order to let that energy go?
So just that terminology that you're letting that energy go. You see, it's not us letting the energy go. It lets go of us when we no longer feed it.
Uh-huh.
So it's not what happens to us that's important. It's what we've done with it that's important. And when we continue to live in our woundedness, we continue to live in the trauma and replaying that trauma through, whether we're going to counseling and talking about that over and over and over again, we're only reinforcing the trauma. So, I'm not saying that we don't need to talk about it. Um, I think everybody needs to be heard. Everybody has a story, and their story is important to them, and it's impactful in their lives. And yet, we don't need to keep telling that story over and over and over again for years. It just keeps us stuck in it. So, what I've discovered over 35 years of doing this work is that what happens with the EMCS process is that it just kind of goes away. It's like it's just not really there anymore. It's like the experience that I had all those years ago with Reverend Hyder. Issues came up they had to do with my father, and once I released that emotion, and then the days that followed, I couldn't even remember what it was about. I just didn't have that. It just my brain just didn't go there anymore. It's like I created a new neuronal pathway to a more powerful part of my brain that supported me in a completely different way. So it's like shifting the way the mind works. It's shifting the way all those. So I compare it to, for those of who remember. Of course, I think it's going to come back. The old records, what were those records made up? Vinyl records, and there was a song on one album that you liked, and you played that over and over and over. You'd put the needle on, and you'd just go right over to that particular song, because it had been played so many times. So it's like our brain does that. It plays the same song over and over and over again until we create a new pathway to a different song. And my method is to create a positive song, a song of joy, and a song of love, and a song of courage, and a reminder, really, of who we are as the divine children of the universe. That we are love, and that we're here to live from the love that we are, not to live from our trauma, our woundedness. Yeah. That's not what we're doing.
Well, I think that's important to really focus on. That number one, we can live in happiness and joy, and that we were also created to live in happiness and joy. And our human construct, and I may be wrong in saying this, but this is how I see it. Our human construct, our environment, this old energy that's been replayed over and over and over again is what's creating our unhappiness.
Absolutely.
It's
the paradigm, the slavery that we've been conditioned to. We're enslaved by the belief that we are not divine, that we are not created as divine beings.
Yeah.
So the best that we can do is work hard and somehow struggle to get through life, and then we die, and then what?
Yeah. So with that being said, how would you leave? What words of wisdom would you leave us with, knowing that we could be happy?
Well, I have no doubt. I'm really clear that we are incredible beings, that we have been designed in this awesome way to each one of us be an expression of the source itself. And I believe that we are the furthest expression of the source itself. So each one of us has a uniqueness wherein the source itself can experience itself through us in 8 billion different ways. Mm-hmm. And so to rejoice in that, to recognize that no one of us is better than the other, or that we all have a part to play, and each one is necessary. If you think of it as a tapestry, we're all a thread in that tapestry that makes up this beautiful, incredible picture of who we are as a species. And to own that and to live that is, that's my hope. That's my intention, is to, and the work that I do with people is to help them to remember who they truly are and to live a life from that incredible gift that we've been given.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if we could all just be happy?
It would, and we can.
It's that simple. We can. We can all do it. Every one of us can do it. We can do it. It's a choice, right? Live in choice.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
and that choice is to think thoughts, to be aware of the thoughts that are coming into you and grab only the ones that will lead you to the place you want to be.
Yeah.
Yep. Reject.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's a great way to end this. So if people you do online sessions
I do.
as well. So how do people get a hold of you?
So my website is www.garycone.com. My phone number is 405-842-0695. And my email is drcone@garycone.com.
And
Place.
yeah, and all of that information will be in the video at the bottom of the video description, so that you can contact Dr. Cohn at any time. I do highly recommend him. And again, I can speak from experience. So, gosh, so Gary, thank you for being here, and all of you guys for listening. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next time.